Welcome, everybody. Oh, gotta get my mic a little closer. Welcome, everybody, to the blueprint to the muscle up. We've talked about it before. We're going to go a different approach. I believe last time we spoke about muscle ups, we were talking about movement efficiency, how to make it easier so that you can do more. I could totally be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how we framed it last time. Today, we're going to give you a roadmap on how to get from level 1 to level 10, how you can be the best muscle upper that you could be. And we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important, why you should want to get better at muscle ups, really, which most people listening, they probably want to get better at them and have a good idea of why. But we're going to get a little deeper into it. Then we're going to go over all the levels and how, depending on which level you're at, how you should or could be training them. Before we get started, Sam, what did you eat today? What was your breakfast today?
My breakfast: 3 eggs, a chicken sausage, 2 slices of toast with peanut butter, and a banana on the toast.
Wow. To fuel
like
that long run.
Yeah, that's my everyday breakfast. I eat that like 95% of the time.
Was that before training?
No, because I train early, and I'm not going long. Like, my runs aren't more than an hour, so I don't eat anything before I train. I have coffee in the morning, and then I go hit it, and then I eat afterwards.
Yeah. What chicken sausage is it?
Idell's. I think it's from Costco.
Someone's been recommending me one. It's like a lady's name. It might be like Amy Lou or something like that.
Okay.
And it was at Costco as well, and it was
okay,
some great brand. They got all types of flavors. I haven't tried it yet.
I'll be on the lookout for it. What about you? Would you eat, Mr. Strong Legs, Strong Body?
I had 135 grams of white rice it's cooked with some butter and lemon and lime, salt. I had 5 ounces of bison and 2 fried eggs on top. Wow, the days I don't train, I got a little extra time. I'm relaxed, so I'll cook a few eggs to go on top with it. The rest is already prepared. Oh wait, and I had a peach because it's pretty much peach season. It's a little early right now. It's bothering me because I'm really ready for the peaches. Yeah, it's so I had a pink peach, so like the inside's like whitish pink.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
it was so good.
Nice. Any homemade baklava for later or what?
No. Not yet. Maybe in a few days we'll I'll make my wife get to it.
Those are so good.
Yeah, with the pecans. Yeah, thank you for reminding me that, actually, because my birthday is coming up, so I can force it.
I'll never forget that. Wish I had more of it.
That usually I would have some Greek yogurt too with some fruit, but the store didn't have the one I get, so I had to go to a different store tomorrow to get it. Yeah, with a little bit of honey, but I usually do that on training days. Feel full, feel ready to go. And some coffee, of course. So yeah, it was delicious, and I was so excited to eat the eggs today. I'm always excited for food. But anyway, back to the muscle ups. You have to be fueled if you want to compete well and you want to do muscle ups well. You got to be fueled. So we have I wrote out a few events before we kind of get into the training aspect of it, but just to highlight what we're talking about in the CrossFit Games season, and you could probably think of your own events or something that you're doing in a CrossFit competition you're doing. But throughout the season, we see ring muscle ups at every stage, not every year at every stage, but we have seen them at every stage. So in the open, we've had the chipper that started with rowing, toes to bar, wall ball, power clean, into the 20 ring muscle ups. And basically for everyone, you had to get a few muscle ups in order to get to the next level. So you had to be pretty fatigued and to be able to do one. We've also seen, back when the open was 5 weeks, there was 2 rounds for time. It was really just an AMRAP, where it was like 100 double unders, overhead squat, 100 double unders, something else, 100 double unders, 12. Yeah, dumbbell snatch, 12 ring muscle up. And it went back and forth. So again, pretty
800
heavy.
double unders.
Yeah, if you
It's like
finish the 2
100
rounds, 800.
Yep.
Crazy. So 12, you had to do 12 under, again, some pretty good fatigue. Quarterfinals, we've seen the pistol GHD muscle ups, 30, 20, 10 for 3 rounds. There was another kind of chipper-esque
30, 30, 10.
Oh yeah.
It was 30 pistol, 30 GHD, 10 muscle ups.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
so 30,
you should
30,
know this.
10.
You did it.
I know. I've done it twice. And then there, yeah, I really like that workout, but it crushed me. Then we have it was 9-9, 15, 15, 21, 21. It was a barbell movement, front squat, and gymnastics movement. So you had to do 15 there in not unbroken, but one set before moving to anything else. And then this year, 2024, in the quarterfinals, we had that gymnastics chipper-esque where it was, toes to bar, handstand push-up. Then it was
handstand push-up, rope climb.
Yeah, rope climb with a handstand push-up, and then it was wall facing and 20 muscle ups. So that one was under some serious fatigue, and the speed of it matters a little bit more as you get to quarterfinals. You have to be able to do more. You have to be able to do more quickly. And then we get to semis and games. We've seen like this year at semis, you did the final event, 15 ring muscle ups. You basically had to be unbroken for a man if you want to do really well. There's a few that might be able to break it and be really quick on the lunges. And with the females, probably 2 to 3 sets. We had the weighted ring complexes last year, which took a lot of people out. So again, these are getting harder. The games, we've had 30 for time. We've seen someone go unbroken. Most men were doing these in 2 sets that were competitive. Even females were in that 3-set range. We've had the muscle up biathlon, one of the coolest events ever done. And then we had a muscle up sandbag where we saw Roman Krenikov break his ankle. That was 35 total reps with a lot of movement back and forth. And those people were doing 7 reps unbroken 5 times. And that was kind of like the simplest part of the workout. So you can see, you can get away with being able to do a few reps, where that's where a lot of people at. If you're, an open level athlete in the quarterfinals, you got to be able to do them under fatigue and mixed with a lot of things, especially things that are also going to make the muscle up tired. And then moving into the games, if you're at this level, you have to be very proficient at them. And that's kind of the end goal, is you want to be able to do them fast, efficiently, and do them with like a really high level of execution under fatigue from not just an event, but multiple events. So you can kind of see there's levels to this. So yeah, we'll move into your initial thoughts that you have jotted down here to become better at the muscle up.
Yeah. I think it's one of the, like, if you condensed all their movements down and you look at one that is always going to show up, like you could bet on it. Muscle ups is one of them. Like they make it a high priority movement across all stages of the competition, which is great because it's nice when you have a movement that is at every stage, because you can see how they're changing the fatigue and difficulty of the movement as you reach higher levels in the competition. Not to say that some of the open events where the muscle ups are placed isn't hard, because last year that chipper, the 20 at the end, it's very tough. Those 20 are very tough. Even though it's not a lot of volume, you do a lot of work beforehand, so it becomes perceptually very difficult to do the muscle up. So yeah, it's a great movement. In the context of CrossFit, it's always tested. So you need to be able to do them. You need to be able to do them in a lot of different environments, situations, different levels of fatigue. So you're going to have to take time in your training to develop it and move it from a place where maybe you can do a few by themselves with lots of time in between, all the way up to where you're doing it. Well, maybe you're not going to go to games, but just to give context, like you're doing it amongst many different movements that are creating fatigue and the working musculature that you need for the muscle ups. So that could be one way we think about, like, what's the highest level for a movement, and specific to this conversation, the muscle ups, like doing the muscle up with 2 or 3 other movements that are using the same primary musculature to perform the movement. So pulling, gripping, hip extension, even elbow extension. So you, like that pistol GHD workout from the quarterfinals 2 years ago. I mean, that was both of those movements were creating a lot of fatigue in the musculature you need, which would be your core and your hips. So it's going to make the muscle up a lot more challenging, even though your grip wasn't really fatigued. But the primary engines of you getting over those rings, which is your midsection, was getting really lit up. So now transition, because we want to spend time talking about, or I should say, giving you an idea or a blueprint of how you could develop your muscle up. And so some of the first things that come to mind, which at least for me, when I'm looking at clients and we're wanting to advance or develop a movement like a muscle up, the easiest place to start is asking them why they struggle with the movement, or where they struggle with it, when they fatigue, how they fatigue. It's just always great to ask people, the client, the athlete, why aren't you better at this movement? And then we can, of course, take their insights, use that, and then we can also watch them perform, because there might be a mismatch. They might think one thing, but you watch, you go, yeah, well, actually, there's more going on here than you're noticing. So that's always a good place to start. If the muscle up is something you want to get better at, or you want one of your clients to get better at, start with asking why, where, and when do I struggle with this movement? And then that can help you get closer to the truth around what you need to be doing to get it better or to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, which I just briefly kind of mentioned, you want to leverage visual noticings. So as a coach, visually watching people do the movement, you want to just watch how they do it. And if you know what a good movement of a muscle up looks like, or a good execution of a muscle up looks like, then when you watch somebody do it who's not so good, you can start to see where it's breaking down or where they might be inefficient in their execution of it. So you want to use your eyes, and then also perceptual noticing. So this is where you ask the client athlete, how do they perceive the movement, feel the movement? What is their experience when doing it? And then you help use that information to kind of layer it on top of your visual noticings. And so that's where you can get the most accurate representation of how they perform this movement and what we probably need to work on to make it better. So you have all that information, and now you're, of course, going to go start applying it and trying to develop it. So the first thing that's super important is adaptation rate, at least for me. Everybody's going to adapt differently. So some people will pick things up really quickly. Some people will not pick things up really quickly. So as it pertains to these levels we're going to talk about, you might be at a certain level for like a year with somebody or 6 months. Whereas other people, it might be like 1 week or 2 weeks, and you have it down, and it's like, okay, let's move on to the next step in this process. So as a coach, you need to be adaptable to the client's adaptation rate, so you're not necessarily leaving them at the same level for too long or jumping them too quickly, because that's usually what happens is, and I've done this many times, you progress people too quickly before they've really dialed in or really cemented the location they are in the skill progression. And when you jump steps, they haven't really locked in what's required at that step so that you can then move on to the next one. So when in doubt, exhaust the level of the skill progression you're on before moving to the next one. So remember adaptation rate. And then let's say little heuristics to figure out somebody's adaptation rate. One could be training experience. So if they are more trained, then on average, you could assume that they will adapt more quickly. If they're less trained with higher skilled movements, it might take a little bit more time. Like, for example, a beginner will adapt quickly to very simple progressions, but with a high skill movement like a muscle up, that might take a lot more time because you're integrating a lot of components. So they might need more practice, more exposure, whereas somebody more advanced, the ramping up of the movement could be a lot quicker. You could also look at just their training. So if you look at people's training, you can see week over week, month over month, like, are they a quick, fast adapter? Are they a slower adapter to the things you're giving them? And then also you could look at sporting background too. So the extent at which they played sports, what type of sports, what type of level did they reach in that sport. You can just dig a little bit and you can figure out through conversation how they adapt, and is this something that is a strong suit or a positive characteristic of this person, or not so much. So let's move on from there. I don't want to ramble on about.
Summary is you have to be like Daniel in the Karate Kid, and you have to paint the fence until your wrist is almost broken, and then you have to wash you have to wash the wood, the floors, until your shoulder hurts so bad that you it's just muscle memory. You just know it. It's just part of you now. And then all of a sudden, you are a black belt, and that's essentially how the levels work.
Yeah, probably a little less intense than his journey, but yeah,
he had to fast track it, and he obviously had the genetics to be a great fighter. So people don't think about those things.
Yeah.
All right, here it is. Here's level 1.
Yeah. So level 1 would be and before we move on, all of these levels, everything we're going to talk about from here on out, is assuming people can do muscle ups. If you can't do them, that's a whole different conversation. And the short answer to that would be you just need to get stronger. If you can do them, then now we can start working on progressing this movement and developing it, making it more robust.
You're not saying that you wouldn't do any of that other training, because there's another day of the week that, and like you said, if that person says their triceps are the limiter, and you know that it is, you're probably doing tricep work. It's not just like this is the only muscle up work you're going to be doing.
100%. Yeah. You will, if you're wanting to develop a skill, you need frequency of exposure to get better at it. Like your brain, if you want to get better at piano, you can't just play it once a week. You need to be playing it all the time. Now, the physical cost is a little different playing piano than it is doing a muscle up. So you have to be smart with that. You can't do muscle ups every day. But the point being, you want to gradually increase the frequency that people are practicing this movement. And practice is a key word. I speak about this a lot with clients, distinguishing between practicing and challenging or expressing a movement or a skill. So these early stages of developing the muscle up, where the intention is practice, like we're trying to practice this movement and move it to a place where we can then stress it and challenge it. So this level 1, where the RX would be bring muscle up, accumulate 5 perfect reps, rest as needed. So there's extremely low fatigue because they can rest as much as they want. There's no constraints because it's very open-ended. You just need to accumulate 5 reps and you can rest as much as you want. You're probably going to be performing this first in the session. So if somebody's wanting to develop a skill, you want to make sure the brain is fresh and firing and there isn't any fatigue, because that's going to, of course, manipulate and hinder the motor learning. So you want to do it probably early in the session, first thing, and then you're going to focus on quality. So if it is practice oriented, which you would ideally share with the client, you'd make sure they understand this is for practice, not for time or anything. This is like, I want perfect reps. So you're going to do 5 perfect reps. Maybe they're all singles, but they're just like perfectly executed. And then that way we're starting to actually accumulate great practice that we can layer on more and more. So that would be stage 1. Super simple. And you could literally build this up to 30, 40 reps. I've done that with people where it's like starts with maybe 10 the first week. And the next week we go 15. And then next maybe it's 20. And then it's 25. And then it's 30 and 35 and 40's plenty. So anywhere from 30 to 40 at that point, we're probably wanting to move to the next stage to give context, because I'm sure people are curious. Like, okay, well, when would it be time to go to number 2, level 2? Like if you built up to close to 30 plus or minus 5, then you're probably ready to move on.
Level 2.
Level 2. Okay, so in this format, it's an EMOM for 5 minutes, 2 unbroken ring muscle ups, so 10 total. And let's assume the fact that they're doing 2 unbroken, they can probably do 4 to 5 unbroken. Like that's a max set. Maybe a few more. Maybe it's like 4 to 6. So the 2 is reasonable. It's not too challenging to where they're possibly going to start failing because we don't want to put them in a position to fail. So some characteristics of this different from level 1 or in comparison to level 1, you still have some fatigue, but it's lower. It's nothing too intense, but you're beginning to introduce it. There's some constraints because now you're working within a fixed time window because of the running clock. But quality is still the main priority because there's no interference. There's going to be plenty of rest between sets, or at least the way you write it should be. So it's a very subtle bump from the previous step, and that's the way it should be. And again, you could build this up to, you could do 2 on the minute all the way up to 10 minutes. Then you could come back down and you could do 3 on the minute and start at 5 and go up to 30. So that'd be 10 EMOM for 10 minutes, 3 on the minute. And then again, at that point, then maybe it's time to move on to the next stage. So, and the reason I have 30, 40 in my mind is because functional volume, which I think we've talked about in the past, that's the volume of work for the movement that is usually tested in competition. And so you need to build to that volume with these movements. And you need to build to it in each of these levels. So each of them, you need to get to about 30 reps. And as we layer on more fatigue and challenge, you'll see that the 30 become more costly or more challenging, just like that chipper we talked about. It was only 20 reps at the very end, but the way it was designed, the 20 felt really hard. So that's how you're wanting to approach the design process, is you're trying to make less more challenging, more effective, because the cost on the body's less. For example, you're better off trying to make 30 reps really hard than just give somebody 80 reps. Because you just spent 80 reps. And then what are you going to do the next week? Are you going to do 100? You're not going to do 100. And that's not smart. So there's a sweet spot with volume, and then we pull it back. We add a little bit of challenge, then we build it, then we pull it back. We just keep doing that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's a smart, progressive way of building these skills.
Yeah, so less fluctuation in reps, more fluctuation in intensity and challenge. So like you said, you're not spending more. And one could, I mean, if a coach or a client is thinking like, well, I just did, 20 to 30 reps, they were perfect, and now I'm going on to stage 2. Like they essentially could start every 2 minutes, doing 2 reps. If they were nervous about the failure, or if they're like, hey, maybe I can't keep the quality of priority, and they're nervous, they could start there and work down.
Yeah, you could. I mean, if you're, what I would look at is I would go during level 1, like accumulate 10, 20 reps. Most times I ask them to record the rest period. So like, how long do you rest between sets? Because if they're resting a minute and they do that up to 30 reps, like say they performed them in triples and they rest a minute and they did 10 triples. Then if we move on to the next level, if I did 3 every 2 minutes, that's actually a regression because now they're resting longer.
And okay, I was assuming you were saying the level 1 was all singles. Okay, I got you now.
Oh yeah, well, it might start as singles.
Yeah.
But it turns into 3s and 4s or 5s.
Okay, yeah, makes
but
sense.
It's more the formatting is what we're referencing. Like the amount of muscle ups will be dependent upon the person, but the formatting is probably the thing we want to focus on. Or at least in my head, the way I look at this is like, how am I changing the format to progress the movement?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, makes sense. Okay. For some reason, I was thinking you were saying only singles on the
Oh, yeah.
Now I get it. It's you can as long as you're completing it with high quality, you can do as many 100%. As you'd like.
Okay, so level 3, every 2 minutes, 6 sets, 3 unbroken ring muscle ups, and remaining time easy C2 bike. So it's 12 minutes of constant work. So at this level, again, the amount of time between sets is still pretty great, or longer than it is shorter, which is good. Like they're getting a lot of time between them having to do another set of muscle ups. But now we've removed complete rest. So anytime you're doing anything other than complete rest, you're incurring cost, energy cost. But we can, there's a spectrum. So riding the bike easy is a very low cost, which is good because you're not going to accumulate an excessive amount of fatigue, but you're starting to expose the person to a little bit of fatigue while they're doing the muscle up, which is good. This is teaching them how to improve the durability of the movement and also challenge the recoverability. So the characteristic of performing work, recovering your resources so you can do it again. So we're going to leverage the erg. The initial introduction, we would use the bike because the bike is only really working your legs. It's not only, I shouldn't have said only, it is only working your legs. Like it's not working your upper body at all. So whereas if I had the echo bike or the row or the ski erg in there, now I'm incurring some fatigue in the upper body musculature, which will influence the muscle ups. So I would probably start with the bike to introduce them to it. And then as they get better, I can rotate in an erg that is going to work the upper body a little bit more to create further challenge. But I wouldn't do that initially. And so the one thing I would keep an eye on is the amount of time between sets. So 3 muscle ups will take you, say, like 12 seconds. So say that's 12 seconds. Now you get a minute 48 of rest before your next set, which is quite a bit. So we could build it up to 30 or so reps. And as they're showing great proficiency, we could increase the amount of reps per set. So instead of 3 unbroken, it's 4 or it's 5. And so now that's how I would increase the challenge of this piece. I wouldn't just keep going up by 3s till they're at 40 reps. I would try to increase the amount they're doing per set.
Okay. All right. Level 4. Looking similar.
So, yeah. So very similar, but just a subtle change. So let me explain what it is, and then we can talk a little bit about it. So this one's every 3 minutes, 5 sets, 25 double unders, 5 muscle ups, and then in remaining time, easy C2 bike. So 15 minutes constant work. The double unders is more of like a placeholder. So it doesn't mean that you would only put a double under there. You could put a kettlebell swing. You could put a box jump. You could put a burpee. You could put wall ball. Like it's just signaling that you're now implementing an additional movement to create some fatigue before going into the actual muscle up. So this is, as I wrote the notes here, I like a gentle build from the previous step where I'm just adding just a subtle amount of fatigue to challenge the muscle up a little bit more. And now you have to be smart too with what movement you put there, because there is a spectrum. For example, an air squat would be very low impact on the muscle up, whereas a chest to bar pull up would have a very high impact on the muscle up. So you need to be smart with to what degree are you going to challenge the muscle up before they have to do it. So the double unders is kind of like a sweet spot. They're depending upon how efficient they are at double unders. But in this format, 25 double unders should take about 15 seconds. Then the 5 ring muscle ups. I just wrote 5. They could still be at 3 at this point, which is totally fine. That'll take you 15, 20 seconds. So you're looking at, say, 40 seconds of work every 3 minutes. So they're still getting 2 minutes and 20 seconds of active recovery. So still plenty of time between sets of muscle ups. So that's good. You want to bias in this format. You want to bias the time spent recovering versus working. We don't want to have the opposite ratio at this moment.
Okay. Yeah. You say gentle build. Hopefully everyone so far has seen from 1 to 4 has been slow. It hasn't been like it wasn't level 1 completing good reps, level 2 completing good reps with a fixed time, then level 3 wasn't thrusters muscle up.
Yep.
It's more gentle. And
like
you said before, you have to exhaust these things. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean you just exhausted the muscle up and now you're ready. It's like you're now exhausting it with another movement like a bike, and then another movement that's a little lighter with the bike. It's,
Yep.
hopefully that's
Yeah.
what we're seeing.
Yeah. 100. No, that's good. That's a good point. And I was just going to add, you could approach this such as you're going to spend 4 to 5 weeks at level 1. And by the 4th or 5th week, assuming it's gone well each week, they've been building, then you might move on to the next level. And then you go another 4 to 5 weeks, and then you just you keep watching to see how well or not well they're adapting to this approach before you move to the next one. So there's 10 levels here. In theory, this could take a whole year, where it's 4 or 5 weeks for every level. And I would add, it'll probably take longer than that, because most people need more time than 4 to 5 weeks at these levels. If somebody is more advanced, you could get through this in 4 to 5 weeks. And some people maybe a couple weeks. Like you start at a certain, for example, that first level. When I have clients coming off of a break or a down period, the first few weeks I might, just because I need to get volume of work up a bit before we start like really building it, I will make it really open and go, okay, accumulate 20 ring muscle ups, accumulate 40 handstand push-ups, accumulate 60 toes to bar. And we do that for maybe 2 weeks, increase the volume second week. And then by the third week, now I'm starting to integrate those movements into scenarios that I want to begin progressing and starting to challenge them with. So there are exceptions to the rule, but for most people, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks. And some people, you might be at level 1 for 6 months. Like,
I was going to say,
practice for a long time,
especially if you just got your first muscle up, like you could be even, newer to the sport. I'm thinking female or male, but just a little bit weaker. Like they weren't even strong enough they were getting, they were still doing pull-ups and dips. They got their first muscle up. They could be at level 1, 6 months. And then level 2 could be another few months. And then you might have to rinse and repeat because life or, events or something comes up. And then, but that's only going to make level 3 and 4 and 5 way easier for them to progress through if they're really spending quality time. And I was thinking, even if you go back to level 4, if someone's imagining themselves do this right now, like if you were thinking, hey, I did 5 sets of 25 double unders, 5 unbroken ring muscle ups, and they looked good, and I was really good. Like I've been doing this, let's just say 2 months, 8 weeks. And I've been accumulating this. I'm in between, 25 and 40 reps, or, maybe even a little more or a little bit less. But if you're doing that really well, you're probably pretty good. Like, that's not like chump work. You could be pretty good at muscle ups, and this is the style of training you're doing. And you're only at level 4. So people might not think this is hard, but I mean, for a lot of people out there, just do this exactly. Even if you have 10 to 15 unbroken ring muscle ups, like this can be challenging just because it says we're having less fatigue, or the goal is still to look good. Like this could be a hard training session for a lot of people.
It's challenging in a different way. There's many different ways to be challenged in training. I think people assume if you're not on your back, you're not being challenged, but that's false. There's many ways you can be challenged, and with skills, because we think of this as a skill. A large majority of the challenge should be motor learning based, especially initially in the early stages of the movement, meaning you're challenging the brain's ability to sequence the action that is needed to do the movement. Like you got to make that, back to your example, like you got to make it the muscle memory burned into the system. Like it just knows how to do this movement without even thinking. Great example. You ask people who are decent, like they can do 3, maybe 4 unbroken, but that's the top end they can do with the muscle up. You ask them, what are you thinking about when you do a muscle up? And they might tell you, I'm thinking about these 3 things. You go ask Brent Fikowski when he's doing a muscle up what he thinks about. He's probably going to say, I just think about how many, and how many reps I have to do, or how many I'm going to do before I have to break. He doesn't think at all about the actual movement. Like it's automatic. None of his energy is wasted on keep my toes up, make sure to extend my hips, make sure to drive my knees to my chest, push away at the top. Like it's just automatic at that point. He's thinking about, to your point, yeah, what's coming next? How do I need to break these up to make sure that I'm ready for the next movement? And so that's what we're trying to get to. And this is one way in which we do that is we slowly strain this movement, challenge it, but allow for enough recovery so you're able to focus on these characteristics that you need to refine before you eventually move it into a state where the movement is a lot more automatic.
Okay, level 5 now.
Okay, level 5
to introduce a little more intensity.
A little bit more. So the way this is written is 5 sets, 500-meter row at the heavy intensity domain, which without going off on a tangent, you could classify that as like a moderately tough pace. If you did a 10K row for time, it's probably around that pace, maybe a little bit slower than that. So significantly slower than a 5K time trial.
Mm-hmm.
Into 5 unbroken ring muscle-ups, then rest 2 minutes. So we're front-loading work before the muscle-up to drive up some fatigue. But given the intensity of the row, it's not a significant amount of fatigue to where when you go do the muscle-up, you're going to be in shambles. Like it's just enough where you're going to get about 2 minutes of work on the row, maybe a little bit faster for some people, and you're going to get off, and then you're going to hit your ring muscle up sets. So the pace needs to be on point. This is really important. And this is why this is level 5, is you need to know what the right pace is, where it's moderately tough, but it's not too hard, because if it is too fast, the fatigue will be too great and they'll start breaking down. Somebody who's elite or really capable, they could go at a fast row. They could go at that faster row pace that you would probably give them on accident, and they would be okay. But for people who are just entering this level, you got to err on the easier side.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking like if your row is like, if you have a 5K row at like a 145 split, then this might be like in between a 2 and a 205.
No, it'd be faster than that. It'd probably be like a 155.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
challenging but repeatable.
Yeah. Like I said, it may be like if you did a 10K row, which very few people are doing a 10K row for time. It's probably around that. So yeah, if you're rowing a 5K at 145, then yeah, it's probably like a 155. And then if you're rowing like a 150 for a 5K, then it's probably 2 minutes. So maybe that's a good heuristic. Whatever your 5K is, add 10 seconds. That might be roughly like what your heavy intensity domain pace is, which should be a pace that you could hold for technically multiple hours. Like you should be able to hold it for over 90 minutes. So just to give you context. Now in this situation, so this is new from the previous ones, there is rest. So you actually have you have not active rest, but passive rest. Like after the muscle-ups, you rest 2 minutes. So that's signaling that these sets are a little bit more intense and there's a little bit more fatigue. And this is 5 unbroken, which the last one was 5 unbroken. So we're starting to ask for like slightly bigger sets, but that number needs to be relative to what the person can do. So the 5 if I'm asking somebody to do sets of 5 unbroken, they should probably be able to do 10 unbroken as a max set at a minimum. Like it needs to be a good 40, 50, 55% of their best for the sets of work you're doing. Otherwise, you're just going to ask too big of sets. In this context, there will be times where you want to give them bigger sets, but that's what we got going on here for level 5.
Level 6, getting a little mixy.
Level 6. So 5 sets, 15 wall balls, 12 box jump step down, 6 muscle ups, rest 2 minutes. So fatigue still front loaded, but now these implements are unsustainable in the sense that each repetition you're draining finite resources, where on the row, if you were rowing at the right pace, like I said, you could row for over an hour at that pace. So it's a much more metabolically sustainable activity. So the fatigue is not going to continually be increasing. Whereas with wall balls, after 5 minutes straight, you will reach fatigue. Like very few people are going to go 5 minutes straight of doing wall balls, which just tells you that that movement has a limited time window of execution. The box jump, you could go a lot longer. I've done in the past a 10-minute box jump step down test. But if you go at the right cadence, you could go for a long time. You could probably do 20 minutes straight, maybe if you really wanted to. So the point being that the wall ball creating fatigue at a much quicker cadence. The box jump will create some fatigue because the legs are heavy, but it's a little bit more controlled. And with the step down, the speed is controlled. But so now you're going into the muscle up. You will have some fatigue, but not so significantly that you shouldn't be able to perform those unbroken. So the wall ball box jump is strategic. It's just enough work where you've probably been working for about a minute. Your respiration's up. Your legs are a little bit heavy. Your arms might be a little tired, and then you're going to go do some muscle ups. And then the work rest will be around a minute. Or sorry, not a minute. Will be around. You'll probably be working for a minute 30, a minute 45, and then you're resting 2 minutes. So there should be plenty of rest, which is good because the intent here is that the muscle ups, you're front loading some fatigue, you're adding a little bit more, you're adding movements that are harder to pace. They have almost a fixed cadence. So that's going to challenge the muscle up a little bit more, but you still want to make sure that the muscle ups execute really well. So we're going to bias enough rest. So we can ensure that those are performed well. Whereas if it was a minute rest, now we're really going to be stressing the recoverability from set to set, and the muscle ups could break down more quickly. Okay, level 7, 8 rounds per time, 7 cal ski, 5 GHD, 3 ring muscle up. So performing the movement in a per time setting. So now we went from work rest scenarios. Now we're going for multiple rounds. So you're constantly working. These are non-complementary patterns. So all movements are generating fatigue that are going to influence each other and fatigue each other. The rep ranges are low. So you're not going to create a lot of fatigue with one bout of work, which is good. So you're rotating it a little bit, but you're doing a lot of work, 8 rounds total. So lots of transitions. And so now you're starting to expose people to an environment where you need to be working for 8 to 10 minutes at a constant rate. You need to be performing these movements unbroken, constant speeds. The muscle ups are sets of 3 unbroken all the time. So we're starting to move the muscle up into an environment that is more indicative of the sport and getting the respiration up, the fatigue elevated a little bit more, and learning how to manage that. So just a little bit more spicy than the previous step or level.
And we're still talking about training. So would you want to see, splits and see them being consistent?
Not with this format, just because the way it's written, the rep totals are so low that the odds are the splits will be pretty tight. So I'd be more curious to see like what the ski pace was at. But when you like writing something like this, people will have to fit into a certain pace to keep everything tight. Like nothing's big enough to where they'll really mess it up. If they did mess it up, the comment would be like, I had to break up the muscle ups on round 5, 6, 7, and 8 or something. Then they messed it up, which either is the combination was too challenging, or they just couldn't handle this environment yet. So,
or they came out super hot on the ski, and they're like, after round 2, I just adjusted ski, and then it was all the same from there on.
Yeah, exactly. So if it was 15, 10, 5, and it was 7 rounds for time, then I would probably want splits, because now they're going to be tested a lot more, because the sets are bigger. They can go for it, but if they do they start breaking down? How does the speed of the rounds change as the fatigue's increasing? But with something like this, it'll probably be pretty tight if it's
Yeah,
designed for them.
maybe not sit like them noting it, but you would want overall it to be pretty consistent round to round is what I mean. Like you wouldn't
Yeah,
want
it
the
should be.
first 6 rounds. I mean, first 5 rounds. It's 4 rounds to take 10 minutes, and then the last not 10, but and then the last rounds to take double that time.
Yeah. Well, yes, 100%. And what I'm saying is the way this is written, it should lead people to doing it correctly. Like they shouldn't
Okay.
mess this up because
Yeah. Like you
they
shouldn't
will.
have to say that.
Yeah, yeah. It's when it gets bigger, when the work bouts get bigger, that's when you probably need to watch the pacing more. But when you have short work bouts, that usually helps like corral them so they do it correctly.
Yeah.
Because just as
And
an easy
this isn't a
example,
30-minute. This is not like a 30-minute piece either, where like they'll
no,
be hunched
yeah,
over and
yeah,
gasping for air.
exactly, yeah, 100%.
All right, level 8.
Okay, level 8. So now this is a 10-minute AMRAP with 4 muscle ups, 6 deadlifts, 8 bar facing burpees. So there's no cyclical movement, which a cyclical movement or an erg can help regulate pace because you can change the intensity of the movement. A ski can be really fatiguing when you go really fast, or you can go super slow and the fatigue incurred is really low. So ergs are great for helping people regulate intensity, which is why we use it and why I had it in that last example. But in this example, there isn't an erg, which means each movement is incurring fatigue as you perform each repetition. So the client athlete is going to have to regulate speed to ensure they keep moving for 10 minutes. Now the repetitions per round are smaller, just like the last example, which makes it more forgiving. So with small reps per round, the turnover will be a little bit higher. The localized fatigue won't be as great. Just as an easy example, if I gave 10 muscle ups versus 4, the 10 is going to be a lot more costly. Going to probably have to break them up. It's going to force them to slow down more. But with 4, assuming this person's capable, they'll be able to keep unbroken sets each round. So now I'm starting to challenge their ability to pace a piece of work with the muscle up, with movements that are going to create fatigue that's going to influence the muscle up. So a little bit more challenging. Usually, though, which I thought about this after I wrote this, usually you leverage AMRAPs before you leverage for time, because with AMRAPs allow people to understand how long they're going to work for, which will allow you to change your pacing strategy. For example, if you know you're going to work for 30 minutes, you're probably going to start slower than if you're like, oh, I got this 7 rounds for timepiece, but I don't really know how long it's going to take me. You'll probably start faster than you need to, and now you're slowing down at the end. So in principle, AMRAPs usually come before rounds for time because they're more forgiving. But in this leveling process, I went the opposite way just to show that you could do it, and wanted to make a note of it so people knew principally you would leverage AMRAPs more. So you could go, which as an example, the previous example, you could go 10-minute AMRAP and do the same things, having Cal ski, 5 GHD, 3 muscle up. You could do that just to make it a little bit more forgiving for people.
Okay, so then how might they? So if they're on level 8 and they're doing this 10-minute AMRAP, and then week 2, what would you progress for them? Would you keep it 10 or 12 minutes and just make it maybe 5 ring muscle ups, maybe do a power clean and maybe do a box jump over, or like would you just adjust the movement slightly, keeping them all kind of similar and make it so it's still fatiguing the muscle up but similar time domain?
Yeah, I'd probably keep the 10 minutes. If it was executed well, then I would want to, usually my bias is to give them bigger sets. So next week I'd give them 5, but I would change the movement. So it might be 15 box jump overs, 10 kettlebell swings, and 5 ring muscle ups.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit different, but the muscle up is 5. So that's where my focus would be if I was writing this, is I'm just watching the muscle up, and then I want, as the build or the block of training progresses, I'm wanting to challenge them on being able to hold bigger sets unbroken. And if 5's like the limit, then it's like, okay, 5's the limit. So we stay at 5, and then I can just manipulate the other movements to challenge them a little bit more. And if 4 is the limit, then we stay with 4. And again, we just change the challenge around the 4 reps.
All right, level 9.
Okay, level 9. So this is how I think of density. So density in a general sense being like compacting more work in a finite space. So this is a 10-minute clock, 75 cal row, 50 overhead squats, and light. And then in the remaining time, you're going to do muscle ups. So this should lead you, say 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6 minutes. Say it takes you 6 minutes. It gives you 4 minutes to do muscle ups. I wasn't even looking at the left side there, but I wrote that in my notes. 5 to 6 minutes of work before performing the movement. Nice. So when you would write something like this, you don't want to write it so that they only get a minute of muscle ups. That would be worthless, because the goal of this format is you want to give people a big chunk of time to work with the singular movement. So with the 10-minute clock, I'm having them spend half the time working and creating some fatigue, force them to work kind of hard, but I'm not overly fatiguing the musculature they need, but I'm creating some. And then I'm going to give them 4 or 5 minutes to actually do the movement. And so I'm really challenging their recoverability and durability of the movement. Recoverability meaning once they've completed the row and overhead squat, how quickly can they recover as they go to the muscle ups, and so they can start performing that movement. And then durability meaning how well does the muscle up hold up in the midst of all that fatigue. And then with the fact that you're doing that only that muscle up for 5 minutes, can you keep doing sets of it? And can you recover between those sets and keep executing it? So this would be a very challenging format, but a really great way of progressing any skill as a density format. But you usually wait for quite a bit until you're going to put somebody in a situation like this, doing density training. And usually too, I'll start shorter. So usually like 5 minutes. So maybe it's a 5-minute clock. They work for 3 minutes, and then they do 2 minutes worth of that movement. And then each week I extend that out. So go from 5 to 7 to 9 to maybe like 10 or 11 minutes. So 10's a little aggressive, but we're at level 9. So it needs to be kind of tough.
All right. The final level.
The final level, which like this was a semifinal workout from 2022. It's the Atlas Games, because I remember watching Vellner crush this. I think it was 2022, but it's for time 30 muscle ups, 20 burpee box jump over at a high box, and then 10 snatches, 145 for the ladies, 205 for the men. Really great, simple test that even though the muscle ups are first, the muscle ups are super important, because if you're too aggressive with the muscle ups, you will incur too much fatigue, so that not only will the burpees be slow, but the snatch will suffer a lot, because the snatch is the workout. The snatch is what matters here, is how fast you get through the 10. So you have to be really smart with your pacing strategy on the first 2 movements. And so you need to be able to get through the muscle ups in a reasonable amount of time, but not too slow to where you now are losing. Like I think he might have taken, it was under 3 minutes. He did them in like maybe 2.5 minutes or something. Like it was maybe 3 sets. But for those guys at that level, that's why it's level 10. It creates context that the 30 have to be so
proficient.
Proficient, not costly. I can't think of a better word for that right now.
Yeah, because you could argue somewhere between 8 and 9, like those could be harder workouts and harder to do the muscle ups. But that's not necessarily the point. Level 10 has like the virtuosity of it. Like, you have to be good, and it's the good at everything part.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, the 8 and 9 on paper could be harder workouts. It would have to be for the right person, because for somebody really capable, the other ones could be more challenging. But this is like an inverted. So through all the levels, the focus has been that the muscle ups need to be challenged or executed really well, then challenged. Now with level 10, it's the opposite. The muscle ups need to be not incur any cost so that you can do the other stuff really, really well and really fast. So this is where, virtuosity of the movement is really, really important. So by the end of your development of the skill, you should have the movement or skill such that it's a strength and something you're really confident with, and something that it doesn't really hinder the performance of other movements that you have to express. Whereas for most people, they might do 30 and they're blown up. There's no chance that they're doing 20 burpee box jumps after that, let alone 10 snatches at a really heavy weight. So, so this is a nice inversion of what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Mal O'Brien comes to mind when old Mal, like thinking, very proficient, could attack a muscle upset and run to that next movement.
Yeah. Some people could do 20 and 10 and then do the burpee box nice and smooth and then really fast on the 10. Like they could crush this.
I'm trying to think who's the guy that did the 30 unbroken?
Noah's done 30.
No, it was at the games he did 30 unbroken. And then the next year he got he got docked on his quarterfinal score because he had the world record, and he got 10 no reps, and then he was arguing, I have a video for me at the games doing the same thing and getting the reps.
Really?
It's really blanking. You're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about.
Now I'm gonna have to look it up. I think that was 2007 or 18 or 17. It was 18. They had to do. It was 2018. Matt Frazier came third, 2 minutes. First place was Logan Collins, 146.
I was thinking Colin Jenkins, but Logan
Collins. Wow, 146 for 30 reps. That's so impressive.
Yeah, they were
just for context.
They were 15-foot straps, I think.
Wow, 30th place was 3 minutes and 6 seconds for the men. Yeah,
3 minutes, you said?
Yeah, in 6 seconds.
Yeah, I want to say it was done early. It was like on a Thursday or a Friday. Wait.
It was the second event.
Okay, yeah. So
they did the the crit race, and then I think I don't think they had a day off. I think they did that in the morning. Then they did the 30 muscle ups. Then they did the CrossFit Total. And then I think they did the marathon row, and then they had a day off.
Yeah, great game. I mean, minus the marathon row, that's a solid day.
That was, oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's those are the 10. Yeah. Those are the 10. And I think it's worth reiterating. I just kept thinking about this when I was putting my notes together. Like, why are you in a rush? Because I think people these levels aren't complicated. They're nothing super fancy, but the key is you got to spend a lot of time at each of them before you move on to the next. Otherwise, you're just going to run into problems, and you're going to delay the advancement of the movement. So you just got to take your time and really connect to great execution, getting better at the movement, and eventually you'll be able to really challenge it. But you got to be patient.
Yeah, it's you got to own those levels. It's like fight training. They don't just give out that belt. These are your muscle up belts. You have to get it. And even in a lot of fight disciplines, you have levels of a level. You have levels of belt. So it's you got to be able to do the 5 unbroken reps. I mean, you got to be able to do the 5 reps. Then you got to get up to 30. So you have stripes. Then you get your second belt. Yep. So
takes time.
Yeah, people take time in those early stages and focus on them and 100%. Return back to them every once in a while.
Especially you start a new. Yeah, you start a new season, or you've taken a few weeks off, or you did a competition and you took a week off. It's always good to just start back at step 1. And like I mentioned, you might only need a couple weeks there, and then you start moving it back up. But yeah, don't be afraid to revisit the early stages.
Yeah, and if you think maybe you're maybe you're thinking I'm a level 5 and you're like, yeah, I can definitely, like I am level 5. Maybe just try this workout, maybe adjust it a little bit. And if it is like, I mean, if you can't complete it, maybe just hop into level 4 for a little while and you might be able to find where you're at before you start progressing. Cause some people might just have a false idea
Mhm.
of where they are. Um,
Yep.
and there's like no shame in that because you might be level 8 at strict handstand push-ups and you
Yeah.
could be level 4 at muscle ups or
Yep.
snatches or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
um,
I would,
this
and
was
I
the
would pick,
roadmap.
yeah, and I'd pick working sets that are between 25 and 50% of your maximum unbroken. So err on the side of a lower percentage,
Hmm.
because the key with all of these is quality unbroken sets each time. You don't want to be breaking down. Like the only time you really want to be breaking down is like this last level 10 where you're doing 30. You're doing this big chunk, or the stage before with the density, where you're just doing like this big chunk of work where you have to strategically partition the work. But before that point, every time you're doing the movement, unless you're asked to do over 10 reps or something like that for multiple rounds, the intention is to be doing it unbroken. So with your training, you want to pick rep ranges that allow you to do unbroken sets over and
Hmm.
over again.
My last note is there is a level 0 and it's one strict ring muscle up. No one's gonna like that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually wrote that down. One, like if you are struggling with muscle ups, like you can do them, but they're not so great. You could always spend time developing a strict ring muscle up if you can't do one well. Like that's a great way of not only building some strength, but just building some confidence in that movement
Hmm.
for the more dynamic aspect of it.
It's the lifestyle. Strict before kip, everybody. Just do it. It'll make your life so much easier. All right, that was great. Hopefully people don't get discouraged or mad, and hopefully if you're still listening, you feel like you just have a little better sense of how you could improve and get a little better at your muscle ups. And what Sam said wasn't, the gospel, because I'm sure if you asked him on a different day what workout you should be at level 3, he might come up with something. I mean, it would probably be within the same, but it might look a little different. So you don't have to just look at that one workout and say, I'm going to do that workout every day. So just
Yeah.
take it as, some principles. And if as long as there's levels and you're doing the gradual increase, you're probably still going to get better. Then you're going to get to a plateau and you're going to be like, dang, I need to hire a Proof 3 coach, and we'll help you break through that plateau.
100%.
Any final notes?
No, that was good. Thanks, Roman.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Please let us know what you want to hear in the future, and we look forward to the next episode to help you guys out any way we can. So have a great day.